Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this project webinar on behalf of the old Woollen Mill, Raise 2, to give it its proper title. My name is David Johnstone. I'm the CEO of LEOcrowdfunding, and we are an equity property crowdfunding platform. Delighted to be joined, first of all, by Suzy Jenkins from the project. Good evening, Suzy.
Good evening, David. Lovely to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure having you back on again. You've become a bit of a celebrity between project webinars and our weekly broadcasts. You're a regular contributor now on all these various broadcasts.
Just my funny stories you like, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Never a dull moment.
Yeah, the whole face of the building's like.
Yeah, exactly. And also delighted tonight to have Brenda on, our project coordinator for LEOcrowdfunding. Hello, Brenda. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I say you bring Suzy on because you ask her a question and she gives you a good answer. That's the thing. So I'm here to ask the questions tonight, and Suzy's going to give me good answers.
That sounds absolutely perfect. So there's the cue for me to remind all the attendees that this is a webinar where you do get the opportunity to ask questions of Suzy as the fundraiser. So please do avail of the Q&A facility along the bottom or maybe along the top of your toolbar. So don't use the chat box, please use the Q&A, and Brenda will keep an eye on that, and either during it or we'll a Q&A session at the end, we'll do our very best to deal with all the questions. Now, if there are too many questions for the allotted time, and this webinar will last 35-40 minutes, then we do have the facility to ask Suzy to put written answers to those questions, and we then can email those to everyone. So don't panic. If your question isn't read out, we will get back to you in writing and send that to everyone, and also add it to the forums that are there on our platform for those of you who are familiar with that function. Because it's a live webinar, it'll be recorded. We don't read out people's names in terms of asking questions, just to protect anonymity. So let's get straight into the presentation. Again, a massive welcome to everyone. This is I think it's our first one, Brenda, is it, of 2023? No, it's not. Sorry, we've done one other one. This is our second one of 2023. So delighted to get everyone on, and let's get straight into it. So for anyone who happens to be new onto our project webinars, it is important that we cover this first slide. This is to do with regulation and compliance. So LEOcrowdfunding is an equity property crowdfunding platform, and it is important that you understand that what you're going to see tonight is a financial promotion. It's an invitation to invest money into an SPV that is involving a property asset. So it's very important that we highlight that right at the very start. If you see along the bottom there, it says LEOcrowdfunding is an appointed representative of Sharon Limited, which is authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Pitches for investment are not offered to the public, and investment can only be made by registered investors on the basis of information provided by LEOcrowdfunding. So what you're going to see in these slides tonight have actually been approved as a financial promotion by our FCA principal. But it's up to you to look at the information and then make a decision for yourself as to whether or not this is an investment that's suitable for you. So that is a picture of our platform. You can go there. There's risk warnings there, and there's some explainer videos, etc. So feel free to visit there if you have any questions. So tonight, very simply, we'll cover what we call the main aspects of this project, the old Woollen Mill Raise 2, and we'll explain why it's Raise 2 just in a second. I can see from a number of the attendees, investors who invested in phase 1, a number are on here, and no doubt you're interested to see how the project's going in terms of your first investment. And of course, Suzy will be covering that. But you can see on the screen there a bit about Suzy's background: project location, financial summary, the importance of the equity offer document, and then we'll talk about next steps, and of course, answer any questions. So Suzy, absolutely delighted to have you on again tonight. I'll hand over to you to talk a bit about yourself as a fundraiser, a bit about your journey to where you are now with this exciting project.
Well, myself, as those of you who have heard me speak before, I started as a bricklayer, then decided that in the cold, wet weather, this was not really the nicest place to be. So I became a carpenter joiner, and then went back out in the cold and wet to be a roofer because it's the best view up on the roof. So I have years of trade experience, but I also had a science and business management degree before I started in construction. So the management was already there, plus the training I had from my parents with their careers in project management led me to go down the route of managing the jobs I was on, which have just got bigger and bigger. But also I am fascinated by the world of property development. But in this particular case, I watch all of the big people doing boring, same old, and nobody seems to be really trying to change the face of construction with the way the environment is and the need in the population at the moment. The energy crisis that we're going through at the moment. 2 years ago, I was saying we needed to build houses that were far more energy efficient and more cost effective. Well, it seems I was right. Sadly, we haven't built them yet. We should have been in a position to have built them by now. So I'm actually very disappointed that it has taken so long to get this far. But previously, obviously, I've done various other projects, but nothing anywhere near as exciting as this one. This one really will change the face of how we build. And on top of that, we get to save some beautiful listed buildings as well, which again is a real thing. And it has become a new buzzword, reuse. Mm-hmm. Well, there we go. We are also reusing. We ticked every box when we planned this a couple of years ago. I'm quite pleased with myself for that.
That's great, great foresight, which is good to have. In terms of your track record, I mean, you've done a number of other planning projects, and I know you're particularly proud of the picture, or the one we have chosen out of your extensive portfolio. And do you want to explain the significance of this one, and even just maybe allude to some of the planning projects you've been involved in?
Yeah, this particular one, there is a gentleman called Dan Hill who has become very key in the Simon Suzy world. That property there, we were the ones who, it's a listed building, and myself and my mum were the ones who got the planning permission on it and the design for it, and sold it on behalf of our investors to Dan Hill. And that was his manor scheme, which set him up and set him on his road quite well. So yeah, I was quite pleased with that one. But I've done some other really, really interesting things, community projects, sports centres, all sorts, that I've had to wrangle planning through on, where they've just been sitting stagnating. And then I've gone in and managed to sort out a lot of the problems. So I suppose that did all lead me to doing something like what I'm doing now.
Excellent. Okay. And your mother Gaynor obviously is involved with you in terms of providing support, and comes from a strong project management background, I believe.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yes, they both my parents were very, very high level computer people, but my mum did some very large stuff. She was actually head of IT in the Roy Scott Trust, which is the leasing and finance arm of the Royal Bank of Scotland. One of her, and then she went into the venture capitalist 3i as a interim manager, sorting out bits and bobs for them, all sorts. She has had a fascinating career. I very much look up to her, but she's been very naughty lately, as my investors will know. She was very, very poorly just before Christmas, which is why she isn't on with me tonight. She is fully recovered, but gets very tired this time of night.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, send our best wishes to her. And no doubt she'll be watching the recording if she's not in the background. And
she's very cross because I've got the earbuds in, she can't hear.
That's the value of a recording. And that really brings us then to what tonight's about. So the old Woollen Mill, this exciting project that you've been really consumed your life for the last number of years, and probably tested your passion for property. I mean, we'll be digging into that now. So yeah, so just explain what exactly is this project, maybe a little bit about how you came across it, but we obviously want to spend the bulk of tonight talking about where you are now with it.
Well, where we found it from was we have a family history of watermills. My grandfather was a miller, great-grandfather, sorry, was a miller in Pershore. And my father has always been fascinated with watermills and wanted one. So my mum did a search for a watermill in Devon. This popped up. and slightly bigger than what we were looking for, but very, very interesting. And we said, oh, we might be able to do something with that. Let's give it a go. And here we are now.
Excellent. Okay. And this is a planning uplift project. So as we'll discuss in a few moments, you have done a raise as part of the planning, but just for any of the maybe new people on, this is a project that we call Planning Uplift, which means that there isn't currently planning on this site. And Suzy's project is the application to achieve planning to then allow her to execute the build phase. So just to make that sort of clear up front in terms of what is this project, and we'll certainly get into that in a few moments. So again, you mentioned environmentally sustainable, and that's something, again, a passion that you have, Suzy, and this type of historic, well-known local community site that means a lot to the community. Being able to bring that sort of sustainability to it is important.
Very much so. If you listed buildings, often people see as a noose around their neck, but to me, they're a fascinating opportunity. They're our history. And the listed buildings officer calls our historical report the tome. It's over 150 pages long. But it is a fascinating building with a wealth of history. I think the most interesting thing we found out was the building in the background of me, the white one, at the moment is a really nasty, horrible grey. And it used to have an extra story on it and was rendered white. So when we found that out, it was a fantastic opportunity to turn it from its horrible grey into what it used to be, but also which is far nicer for us. But as I say, the history of the site is fascinating. If you look in the bottom corner of the picture on the left, that will be our business centre, and effectively we're just giving it, that's it, where your cursor is, left a bit more, there, that building. It's just having a very, very light refurb on the inside because it's beautiful. And if we cut it up and try to make it into a house, it wouldn't work. But there is a need for people wanting to work from home. Like me, sometimes home is just too boisterous an environment. It's quite nice to be able to go somewhere. And also, if you have a meeting, do you want people coming to your home, or is it nicer to potentially go to an office and have a meeting?
Yeah. Okay.
We've all seen the kids jumping in on the Zoom meetings, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely, and some older ones as well, not just kids. There can be so a whole new I think entry in the college or the Collins English Dictionary around Zoom and Zoom spaces and all the rest of it. So but yeah, okay, so that's a brief overview, and now what I really try and do is get people an idea of where you want to take this. So there's a couple of CAD imagery videos here, hot off the press, came to us today. So Suzy's working hard to get them to us, but this will let people see from sort of the dilapidated, state of disrepair. This is Suzy's vision.
So that's the car park. You're coming from the self-build plots. You can see the mill on the right, bungalows in between the mill and the river, because the flood bund will actually hide them from sight. Community centre on the left there.
I'll play that one more time.
Yeah. So bungalows there, and then the community centre in front. It's a couple of old barn buildings that are made from old water tanks from the steam industry. So they're going to be repurposed into a community centre. I've got various people already wanting to have a go at those. Those are the self-build plots in the background. So riverside location.
I'll play this one now as well, which is a bit of a bird's eye view.
Yeah, so there's the office on the right, bungalows, the mill buildings, and then my active houses on the left-hand side. So those houses should produce more power than they need, and hopefully sufficient to also charge an electric car. So what we'll be building is houses that not only are very cheap to run, but also provide the fuel to go to work with. They may need a top up from the hydroelectric power, but again, we plan to get that going anyway. And then in the car park for the business centre, there will be public electric car charging. So each house will have one, but if they need more, they can use the public areas, which, yes, they may have to pay for. But again, if that's run off the community energy scheme, then they're paying into their own pots anyway, and there will probably be a way to organise. But the idea behind the community energy scheme is it'll also pay for the maintenance, because with this being what they call a garden village or a Woollen scheme, the landscaping is a lot more than your little twigs that you get in normal developments. You know, your little token trees. The landscaping is an integral part of the whole scheme, which is partially why I need this extra raise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good, that pivots in nicely to where we're heading to now with more details. So, for anyone
just
who
back on that, David, just
yes,
one
of
thing.
course.
That part at the front, that's the existing houses. There's existing houses that lead in on the driveway into your scheme. Wouldn't that be correct? Yes. Just in case people were wondering why there's different styles of houses at the front. But that's
originally in the very early stages, we had a similar terrace directly opposite, so that it sort of made a way in, but our historical consultant didn't like that at all. And he wanted the view of the mill to stay the same, which is why we've got two houses that look onto the main road, but the whole way in is the same as it is now. We've also got all of the orientation of the site mimics where the old warehouse buildings used to be. Again, as a nod to what it was historically.
Okay. So just remind everyone, if you have any questions on anything that Suzy has mentioned so far, or if anything's jumped into your mind you're not sure about, please put it into the Q&A. When we get to that section, Brenda will be able to put those questions to Suzy. So into the Q&A, and this is a great opportunity to be talking directly to Suzy and put any questions that you have to her, particularly any of the investors in Raise 1. You may have some questions around, around the progress from there. So if it's not covered in the next couple of minutes, now is your chance to ask the questions. So for anyone who's not particularly familiar with England, do you want to just give a quick overview on exactly where North Taunton is?
Yeah, it is down in Devon, beautiful place in the countryside that everybody wanted to move to during COVID. Exeter is very famous for the cathedral, the university, but also it's very, very into the sort of sustainability and it's offering a lot of courses all to do with the environment and how we change all of the things that we're doing normally to be better for the climate. So we couldn't have chosen better, really, to be in an area that already loves this sort of thing. It also has a direct rail link into London, which is very handy. And Oakhampton Railway was recently reopened, which goes straight to Exeter. And they've recently announced they're putting in a second one, which is more accessible and closer to North Taunton, so even better. So Oakhampton is very up and coming. Yeah,
and the actual mill itself is like right on the edge of the village, so it's really part of the community.
Yes, that's North Taunton, so Oakhampton is surrounded by various little towns, North Taunton being one of them. And it's lovely. It's got some very famous people as part of its history, poet laureate and artists. So it has which is the other thing that we've been talking to the community about. The community centre will probably have artist studios and theatre type space in it, because that's what the community very much like and want.
Brilliant. Okay. So we need to obviously get into the nitty gritty of the second raise. So just as the summary of what this raise is, Raise 2, again, planning uplift for the redevelopment of the site that we've just been discussing. You can see there on the right hand side, the total raise amount, the maximum raise amount is £42,000. The minimum investment amount is £100. I know, Suzy, you're obviously keen to, even from a brand point of view, give the opportunity to a lot of investors to be involved in this project and feel part of the delivery of this exciting development.
Yes, one of the things is the learn side of it, isn't it? And this one has everything, because it's got conversion and all of the drama that we've had to go through since we took over the planning for the phase 1. Also, what you have to do what they class as a major development, which is the phase 2. And then thirdly, if you want to do something different, i.e. my active houses and the Woollen scheme, again, we've done that. So we've ticked a lot broader spectrum of boxes than your normal, I want to build a house on this little infill plot, because those are similar, but a lot less complicated.
Yeah. And I know that you have sort of taken some input from John Corey on your project. And I know he likes to point out that investors sometimes have an option to go and spend sometimes thousands and tens of thousands of pounds on courses and weekends away and resorts about the theory of property. Whereas for £100, someone could invest in your project, have access to the shareholder agreement, the equity offer document, and then effectively have a back seat in the journey of you going through the planning, been obviously getting shareholder updates and you literally real time being involved in the project, which for £100 is really quite a very exciting learn and earn type opportunity.
It is, and I actually feel I would like to give a lot more on the learn side of it. Is something that John and I talk about a lot, that there is so much that has gone on in the background and so much going on in my head, in essence, and in the work I do, that I would like to be able to share more. So we're talking quite a lot about how I can give a bit more to the investors once this one is sort of done and dusted, and because we do have some limits about what we can do, don't we, because of all the regulation with the FCA control.
Yeah, and probably when maybe after this raise, when we'll have a group of shareholders from raise 2 and a group from raise 1, we can maybe do a joint sort of shareholder meeting and really focus on the learning points and the key takeaways. So I think that's something we can definitely arrange quite quickly. So the projected return on investment that Suzy's offering is 50% per annum on this project, and it's estimated to be 12 months, but it's structured in such a way that if there happen to be some appeals and delays like we've experienced through COVID, etc., it could go out to 24 months, but it is 50% per annum. So that's what's on offer. So I think this is probably the key slide for tonight, Suzy, in terms of both those who are already investors and the new investors. You've already done one raise. You raised 111,000 on that first raise. The maximum target of that first raise was 155. So you didn't actually raise the money that was required in total. So how much have you spent to date? And then how have we kind of ended up to where you are now, coming back for that little bit extra?
Well, it's gone up since we put the figure together, because it's a few weeks getting the approvals and all sorts, isn't it? But as of when I did this report, and incidentally, we've had to prove to the penny, haven't we, to sharing that this is true. It was 108,000, which is architects, and we had a slight issue with our planning consultant going off sick in the middle of the project, but the architects have taken that over and acted as the planning consultant, which was fine. If we need to go to appeal, he's now recovered, so he can sort the appeal. But most of it, we were near enough bang on with our estimates. Although some of it, the time, the effort, exactly, the time and the effort, I worked out the other day that I put in excess of what I anticipated 100 days of work into it. And I'd already put in a significant amount of days work, but 100 days of work chasing people, trying to sort flood reports out and backwards, forwards with all sorts of flood issues were the main thing. Even though we started doing all of the flood work, it's been like a ping pong ball. And we've had extra surveys, hence the topographical surveys slightly over, but in the flood modelling, we had to do more surveys, all sorts of things. But like I say, we were fairly close anyway with what we thought it would cost.
Yeah, and I think it's, if I can just highlight for people, I know it's a little bit small on the screen there, but this of course is in the equity offer document. But on the left where my cursor is, arrow, this is what Suzy indicated that she was raising the funds for. Her estimate on the costs, you can see, got up to 122,000. And then on the right hand side, all the black figures were literally exactly or under what Suzy had forecasted, and the red ones are the ones that have been a little bit more. So I mean, the application fee for 40 units, you estimated 18,480. it was 18,508. So a couple of pound over, but you weren't far off it there. Jumping down to the ones where it's maybe a slight difference, project management, or on down there to noise survey report, a little bit extra. The listed buildings consultation, that's estimated 2,500, ended up 9,000. Any
Yes.
particular story behind that?
Well, it ended up being far more in depth than we anticipated, but it was what was requested. Although half of that was paid by the current owners of the site to go towards phase one. But yes, as the listed buildings officer says, it's a tone, but it was to make absolutely certain that nobody could come back and say that we hadn't considered every single aspect of its history, because when it previously had planning, several of the planning conditions were because they hadn't actually done the job properly. So we made absolutely sure we did it properly this time.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's also, we have to pay for the right man. And he's somebody that the listed buildings officer really respects. You have to choose your experts so that effectively there's no argument.
Yes, no, that is very important. So, I mean, I think for me, the takeaway is that if you look at the figures in red that are over, there's only one or two of those that aren't within a quite a small margin of error. And that's why on the right-hand side, you are saying the project is still, it's on the original budget. You haven't got your budgets wrong. It just so happens some are a little bit more expensive, and obviously that's within the margin of error. But then I think the bigger issue is you do have to repeat. So just to be really clear for people, you've had to actually, even though you did get some of these reports done, because they're now out of time, you're having to go back and repeat it. So it's like a double expense on some of these line items.
So it's ecology, it's trees. I mean, the tree is the one that, it's the tree that baffles me, because when you look at the level of landscaping, for them to insist we redo the tree survey in case of ash dieback, it would be logical to think, well, hang on, if they're doing this level of care and detail, surely ash dieback is going to be something they'll deal with. But no, the box had to be ticked, so we've had to go back and redo all the tree surveys. And yeah, the ecology is a big one, because we've got several protected species on the site, so they need to make sure that we are protecting them. But the nice thing was, Natural England's report on the planning portal says they have no objections. That really pleased me to see that, because that means we have ticked the boxes well enough.
Yeah, which is important. Now, the last one, I have a bit of a wry smile, because we have public and council support for our design. I don't think I've ever met anyone who is doing a planning application that doesn't say they have public support and council support normally. But can you add any sort of meat to the bones of that? What gives you the confidence that the public and indeed the council are supporting your design?
Well, the council voted unanimously in favour, and they've done it twice now. The first time we went to them was for the phase one, which was back last January, so a year ago. And we showed them what we were trying to get actually validated at that point for phase two. And we were still not getting any feedback from the council about validating it. Showed it all to them, and they were unanimously in support then. But it was a fairly small meeting because we were still in the throes of COVID. When we went back to them at the end of last year, it was actually the day my naughty mother got rushed to hospital. I had to go and present to the council, so I felt a little bit off my game, as it were.
Understandable.
Yeah, but we had a huge crowd. Now, there were a few objections. The people who live in the existing cottages that Brenda showed before, they're not very happy, but they're happy that the mill is being done. But as far as they're concerned, the land opposite their houses should be theirs and should be gardens. Well, that's something every development has to face, isn't it? That some of the neighbours won't be particularly happy, but the whole town are really, really in support. And I've got people phoning up, because we've started to market. People are phoning up the agent all the time saying, "Oh, yes, I'm interested." So self-built plots, we've got local people, although they think they're a bit expensive. Well, they would.
the usual, but buyers tend to think that in most things, don't they?
Exactly. But the other thing is that I still haven't negotiated to Section 106. So when it comes to negotiating that, I'm trying to persuade the council that there should be scope to give some of the self-build plots a discount under the 106.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
if they've identified the need, we should be able to.
Brilliant. Okay, listen, I think that's good detail on that. So before we really sort of move to wrap up and questions, just again, kind of been really clear on the financials, the GDV of the whole project, if planning is successful or when planning is successful, about 17.6 million. And again, the extra offer document will break all this down in terms of self-build plots and the units, etc. But the land value with the planning, you reckon, is around about 3.8 million. So that's kind of the figure that's been used in terms of the crowd investors. So just to summarize this before we move to wrap up, the crowdfunding raise is for £42,000 to cover the rest of the cost of the application, plus the paying of some reports that were already there that now have to be redone. But 42,000 finishes off the application. Have you got a timeline on that? Just while it's in my mind, what sort of timeline would you expect to have the final approval?
The final approval should be, she says, a month to 6 weeks.
Okay.
From
so
those reports, the reports being submitted.
Yes.
But then some of this money is also going to get us to a liquidity event. So the planning isn't just the first hurdle. It's getting the Section 106 agreement done, and it's getting it to a point where it's actually saleable as a buildable project. So some of this is the bits that come in between. So while we're financing it and getting to the liquidity event, we'll also be using some of this money to just do the bits and bobs that need doing. So that it is, as I say, financeable, available.
Okay, no, perfect on that. So £42,000 raise, the 50% ROI means that the ROI back to the investors is 21,000. I mean, all things being equal, very rarely is in property. Certainly planning is on the higher risk scale. But in the best case scenario, couple of months time, the money could potentially be returned, or there could be some further hurdles down the line. But that's just giving you the time scale on that. 21 grand on the 42,000. So there's 420 shares issued, £100 a share, which is also the minimum investment amount. So the crowd investor return as a percentage of the projected profit is 1.1%, just as how we tend to express that ROI. So you can see then the total funds projected return to the crowd of 63,000. So again, this information is in the equity offer document. We can go into more detail there. So I'm keen to get on here to questions and answers in a minute. So I'll just play one more cat imagery, and then Brenda will go to you for questions.
That's fine. Yeah, plenty of them to answer.
Good, good, good.
This is where I start sweating, is it?
So
that one, that video shows the community centre very well, which I was talking about with the arts and all sorts going into it.
Yeah, okay. Right, Brenda, we'll hand over to you for these. We'll try and just run through them, and again, just sort of a quick answer if we can, Suzy, sort of high level for now.
I'll try and summarize them as best I can. So going from the top, someone has asked, the initial deal is 50%, then a 4.17% per month pro rata after that for every month that it ran on. They said, why give away more profit doing another raise? Why not fund this amount, 25, 42,000 yourself?
Because, well, for two reasons. Firstly, because I wanted to give the opportunity to the crowd. Really, that is the reason, to give the opportunity to the crowd. It's also very difficult to raise funds in an ordinary fashion for this sort of thing.
Okay, I think that answers it. Yeah. So the timescales then for raise one, I think they said phase one or phase two, but I think they mean raise one and raise two. Is the raise one payout dependent on raise two being successful and full planning being achieved? I think the answer is probably yes to that, but the two raises would be dependent on each other.
They are and they aren't, because I've got deals in place with the people who are writing all the reports, but it's never quite as good as if you can say, there's the money, job done. So I would far rather be able to pay for the reports, have my ability to do what I like with them, and that's it, done and dusted. It's not a case of Raise One won't get their funds back if this doesn't happen, because I'd never allow that. The planning will go through, and we will, well, she says the planning will go through. The reports will be done, the reports will be submitted, but this is the better way.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You also mentioned earlier someone had noticed you'd said you took over the planning for phase 1. They want to know what you mean by that.
Well, originally, what they'd done was, those who followed the project from the beginning will know that it previously had planning permission through Wayne Homes, which is one of the, I don't know whether they're nationwide, but they're fairly big down here. I should know, working in the industry, shouldn't I? They had planning for over 60 on the site, but with a huge amount of planning conditions. And what the existing owners did was, because they're desperate to do something with the listed buildings before they fall down, they just resubmitted what had previously been given permission. But it wasn't a particularly nice scheme, and it was sitting stagnant in the planning process. It had been there 2.5 years, and effectively nothing was happening. We, as part of the conversations we were having with phase 2 and our historical report and all of the work we were doing, the planning officer said, well, for heaven's sake, why can't you just put a decent scheme forward for phase 1? Because you hate it, we hate it, sort it out. So I went and had a chat with the owners, and I said, look, do you mind if we do what they're saying? They're saying that if we change the drawings and the scheme, they will then move forward with it. Are you happy for me to do that? Because you know that I don't like the scheme that's there. When I get planning, it actually won't be of much use to me, because it's not the scheme I want to build. So how about if I put in what I want to build, then when you do achieve planning, it's what I want to do. So I'll find that a lot easier to fund. And they could see the logic. So we changed it to a more sympathetic scheme, and now it's moving. They should, with a bit of luck, both will come through at the same time.
Yeah, which makes sense for the whole site and makes it easier to do your liquidity event at the end of the day. Yeah.
Much easier, yeah.
Okay, we have a few questions just around the learning opportunity and what way you see it progressing in the future. I know probably with COVID, for a lot of our investors, they haven't been able maybe to do site visits and meet together in person if that was an option. Would that be something you would consider in the future to get maybe more involved?
Very much so. I mean, obviously, if I decide to keep it and build it, then one of the first things I think we'll be doing is raise 3, won't it?
Yeah.
In that, I think in that, I will do a completely different thing where there will be regular site visits, and I'm very happy for people to spend time on the site seeing what we do and how we do it, because again, what I'm doing will very much change how construction is working, because I've got 27 years of doing it. I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly, far too much ugly, to be honest. And even how we build it will be different. So this is why I want to hang on to it. I've got people already, as you saw in the due diligence, Brenda, I've got people already making me offers wanting to buy the site. But if I sell it, they won't build it the way that it's designed to be built. But I'd like to share how that is. But also going back to the people who've invested this time, I think we need to put something together that describes the journey, whether that's we do an event where everybody comes to talk to me and I go through it all in person, whether I write it up. I think you tell me, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's maybe, yeah. I think that would be good to hear from the investors, that they give us the feedback about what they want to learn. Another person has asked, just could you give quite a brief explanation what you mean by the listing buildings, consultation, launch costs? What do those mean in terms of planning? It's just probably deep diving a wee bit more into that.
You've lost me there. They're 2 separate lines, aren't they?
Yes, but they're probably just wanting to know a wee bit more about both of them.
Right. So the listed buildings part is effectively, if you go on the planning portal, the links were in for the previous investors. They've got the links to the planning portal. I believe they're also in the offer document. It's actually on there, the historical report that we've written. It's on the phase 2 application, so the new build application. And it goes into photographs from private archives, public photographs, stories from people who live locally, all sorts, effectively the whole history of the site, how it started, who built it, why it's important, what parts of it are more important than others, The funniest bit is that the building that's white in the background behind me is the most historically important building on the site, and yet it's not listed. It's the stone building that's listed. But there we go. Sometimes they get it wrong.
We could probably upload that link into the forums then, and if people want to go and check it out, then they could. So that would probably work. Another person has asked, how many times have you done similar projects? We start from the top.
I haven't done one like this. I haven't done one like this. I've done listed buildings, various different listed, but my portfolio is there. Is the portfolio on raise 2? Because we had it on raise 1, didn't we?
We did. Yes, it's added on to the end of the equity offer document, so you should be able to see it. Did I freeze? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's added onto the equity offer document, so we have that added as an appendix.
So that gives a fair bit, but I've also done, I mean, I've worked in the middle of Oxford. You don't get much more historical than that. Floyd's Road, the homeless shelter, was surrounded by Christchurch College, the police station where they film Moors. So I've been immersed in historical buildings, but it's also conservation areas. It's buildings in conservation areas that aren't necessarily listed but still have value. I've done converted an old factory. And it was really special to this was in the middle of Rugby, and it was really important to the people of Rugby because it was the first place that had employed women. And it wasn't listed, but we still took huge amounts of care with it and its design. So I've done big ones like this, but that one wasn't listed. And then I've done tiny little cottages.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to
but
move.
Some people
Brenda.
say if you've done the smaller ones, you do the bigger ones. So we have a few more just on the percentage ROI, and we have a few on timescales. So I'll do the timescales one first. Why 12 to 24 months for this second raise? Is that just because it's a conservative, or are you just
backside covering, I think is the way to term it, isn't it?
Okay. But you're probably thinking that it hopefully won't take that long, but who knows?
All the indications we're getting back from the planning authority now is that they are happy with what we've done, and it's a couple more boxes to tick, and that's that. So we get the planning, and then I have 3 months to exercise the option. So okay. In essence, we should be within 6 months, but you never know. I mean, we thought we'd be done a year ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
We had someone ask just about then, are you phase 1 or raise 1? Are you talking a further 2 years? But I'm assuming you're not, because I don't think that's your plan. Okay.
No. We've now got a decent planning officer. We've had illness in the planning officer. She was off sick more than she was there. Then they gave us a new planning officer. Then the old one came back, so they took her back, and it all went wrong again. And it still didn't get validated. And then she left. We had a new guy. But by that point, I had got the mayor, the head of the council, the CEO of the council, the ward member, and the town council, all saying to them, for heaven's sake, would you do something with this? This is a really special project. Can you please validate it and get on with it? So everybody that could is pushing it.
Yeah. Very good.
And when I say they're behind it, they really are.
Can I just jump in there, Brenda? Can I just have a big second there? So just obviously there's been delays with COVID, etc. This application is still really the first application. If something did go horribly wrong, you still have the option of an appeal, which is why you're saying for this raise it could extend. Obviously, we hope it doesn't, but just to be clear on that the original plan was always application and then an appeal if required on that. So
like I say, we've just covered our backs, haven't we?
Yeah. But Brenda, we're kind of down to one-word answers here because of time. So we need to wrap up here in a few minutes.
So with the 50% carryover beyond month 24, if you run into 36 months or 48 months, would you still do your 50% per annum pro rata per month?
It isn't part of the offer. I think we would have to see what the profit was at the end of it, because if the profit justified it, then yes. If the profit didn't, then no. I think that's the only way to put it, isn't it?
And then we had a query just on the 1.1% of profit. Is that what investors receive? Yes, that would be from what's listed in equity offer document.
It's difficult, isn't it? You have to show it or reflect it in various different ways for sharing to be happy with it. So in essence, what they put in, it's 50% interest on what they put in.
Mm-hmm.
How we sort of mathematically show that as part of what it's all worth can be very confusing and misleading, can't it? I think it's better to keep it simple, that it's 50% on the money that's put in.
Yeah, that makes much more sense. Yeah. And we had a few questions about the recording. Will there be a recording? Yes, there will be a recording, and we'll send it out to attendees and non-attendees. And the equity offer documents can all be downloaded from the platform. So you can log on to our platform, LEOcrowdfunding.com, and navigate to Suzy's project, and you'll be able to download all the documents. And there's a forum there as well, and we'll add in any questions in there that we haven't answered or have been missed tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brenda, for that, and thank you, Suzy, for answering those. So I know, Brenda,
just one more, David. This
Yes,
will
okay,
lead nicely in for you. It says, when will the project go live? So that's over to you, David.
Yes, okay, thank you very much indeed. So let me pop back up the last couple of slides, and if there are some questions, it is difficult in a short presentation, particularly for the investors on phase 1 to kind of see the information on phase 2 and relate it to phase 1. So if there are any questions around the timelines and the 12 and 24 months and all the rest of it, definitely get your question on the forum, and Suzy will be more than happy to jump on and deal with that in more detail for you. So but please do that. So just literally moving to wrap up here. The question was when it goes live. Actually goes live tomorrow. So we are literally view deal currently. What that means in view deal is you can actually look at all the information available for the project. So if you go onto our homepage, you'll see the old Woollen Mill Race 2 probably along the top, I'm guessing, on the homepage. And when you click on that thumbnail, you access these pitch pages. So there's an overview on the project, there's the financials, there's the information on the team, and then the forum that Brenda's been mentioning. You can go there and see all the questions that are there, answered by Suzy and the Leo crowdfunding team. And what I would suggest and encourage, if anyone is thinking, yep, I'm really thinking I would like to be part of this raise, if tonight you add in your email address and an amount that you may be interested in investing, it just means that tomorrow the team can keep you informed in terms of go live. So the time for go live tomorrow, Brenda, is it 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock? I think we said 12 o'clock, was it?
12 noon.
12 noon.
Yeah.
So 12 noon tomorrow, this will be live. But if you can leave in your registered interest tonight, that would be very helpful. Just so we can stay in touch with you, particularly if people perhaps haven't made themselves fully investor ready. For those of you that are, then obviously you know that you are. But if you've just registered recently in the platform, you need to complete your appropriateness test, your KYC, your AML, your category, if you're high net worth individual, sophisticated investor, or retail investor. That all needs to be complete before you can invest in this project. So maybe you need to reach out to us about that, and then we're happy to come back to you. So the arrow's pointing there to the equity offer document download. So that's where you go to access the document with all the information and much more in terms of what has been discussed tonight. So again, just reminding you, if you can go and register your interest, you'll see just an email there and an investment amount. It's been really encouraging, Suzy, actually see the amount of people who have registered their interest already just in the space of 48 hours for the project. Obviously, you have been on a number of our broadcasts in the past. I think you're a bit of a broadcast celebrity now in the Leo crowdfunding family. But I think people really warm to your, well, first of all, your knowledge of property and the journey that you've been on, but just your enthusiasm for your project and your energy you bring to it. I think certainly in the previous raise, which is actually the highest number of investors we've ever had on a project, was your raise 1. So I think that will be reflected in the registered interest and then tomorrow. So I don't think, Brenda, anything else, any other questions drop in that are really urgent before we wrap up?
Not an urgent one, no. We probably can go back on this one. they were just talking about if there was delays with the profit increase, but it's probably you get your 50% per annum and then another 50% per annum. So I suppose, you know, Suzy did answer that's really more the simple way to put it across.
Yeah. And again, if any more detail on that, put it in the forums and Suzy can answer it from there. So that really brings us to the end. Suzy, I'll give you a chance to have a last minute wrap up and then we'll finish up.
I lost for words, which is very uncharacteristic, isn't it? The one thing is, thank you very much for everybody that's taken the time to listen to me babble on again. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no, and we appreciate you taking the time. I know you're sort of working, obviously, in your day job, doing this as your passion, but I know you're really keen to get this to a point that you can put 100% of your time, effort, resources, energy, passion just into this project, and hopefully that comes pretty soon. So again, can I thank everyone for being here tonight? Thank you, Brenda, for doing just a good job on the questions. And we will, as Brenda said, there'll be a recording of this go out to everyone who attended. And then we are live tomorrow at 12 noon. So again, if you can, register your interest if you haven't already. And if you have, then you jump on at 12 o'clock if you're wanting to invest and make your investment. And with that, I will wrap up. If anyone does need to reach out to us, investors@leocrowdfunding.com. And again, there's the support email as well. If you need me directly, it's just david@leocrowdfunding.com. And that will bring us to an end for tonight. So thanks everyone for joining. And we look forward to this being a really exciting tomorrow as we kick off, Suzy.
Very much so.
Okay, bye everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.